like I always face adversity, since growing up. In each level, it always been something. So you just know how when you figure out how people come at you, and life is a cycle. It keeps repeating over and over and over. Then you understand, what game this is or what they're doing. So I can never feel less than.
Welcome everybody to the sports culture, all things sports. It's Jay Banfo, and we gotta talk about Shedeur Sanders. But before we get into that, like, comment, share, subscribe, and thanks for your support. So, it was announced today that the rookie quarterback Shedeur Sanders will get his first NFL start on Friday in a preseason matchup versus the Carolina Panthers. Now, he isn't necessarily started because of great play during practice, but more so due to injuries at the quarterback position for the Browns. Kenny Pickett and Dylan Gabriel, both quarterbacks who are ahead of Sanders in the depth chart, will be sidelined due to hamstring issues. Now, whether Sanders played good or not, this will be a great opportunity for the fifth round quarterback to get live game reps. Now, expectations must be tempered when discussing Sanders and a possible starter role for the Cleveland Browns. There's been a lot of backlash from media pundits and content creators to the Browns and how they have handled the quarterback role. Joe Flacco, the projected starter quarterback, is 40 years old and clearly isn't the future of the Browns. Kenny Pickett has had an up and down career thus far, and their third round pick, Dylan Gabriel, has not had the best of camps. That brings us to Sanders, the fifth round pick out of Colorado. Now, it's hard for me to give the Cleveland Browns the benefit of the doubt when it comes to developing quarterbacks, but so far, they have not done a bad job with Sanders' development. Sanders' first start this Friday is going to be must-see TV. He has been so polarizing since his college days, and we haven't even discussed Deion Sanders and how he might insert his opinion on his development. I'll be tuned in, and hopefully the media evaluates his first NFL start with proper context. Now, with that being said, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Welcome everybody to the sports culture, all things sports. It's Jay Banfo, and we got to talk about Shedeur Sanders. But before we get into that, like, comment, share, subscribe, and thanks for your support. So, today at practice, Shedeur Sanders suffered an oblique muscle strain injury that may cause him to miss the team's next preseason game on Saturday versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, this injury is a major blow to the fifth round quarterback out of Colorado. After an impressive NFL debut last week, in which Sanders completed 14 of 23 passes for 138 yards and 2 touchdowns, Shedeur was on the path to at least pass up Dylan Gabriel on the depth chart. But with this injury and missing the next game, his path to move up is temporarily hampered. Now, I want to address the local reporters and sports bloggers on how they covered Shedeur Sanders today. Many people in the media were confused when Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, and even Tyler Huntley all got reps during a joint practice versus the Eagles. I saw so many reporters jumping to the conclusion by saying things like, I have no idea what the Browns are doing at quarterback. And Tyler Huntley up third in 7-on-7 can't make this team up. Now, trust me, I understand the Cleveland Browns are the laughing stock of the NFL, and they have been an incompetent franchise for many years. But it bothers me to see how people are insinuating the franchise is trying to destroy Sanders' career before it even starts. We have to understand that most late round picks are not going to get many reps. It's been this way since the beginning, and things aren't going to change just because your last name is Sanders. Also, we have to start talking about the number one overall draft pick, Cam Ward, more than Shedeur Sanders. In his preseason debut, Ward went 5 for 8 for 67 yards in the 2 series he played. He looked poised, showed great leadership, and looks ready to start for the Tennessee Titans on day one. Now, the Cleveland Browns are going to be an interesting team to follow this year. A 40-year-old Joe Flacco is set to start, while you have two rookie quarterbacks waiting for an opportunity. If the Browns have a couple of losses to start the season, the media pundits will be loud for them to start Sanders. Hopefully, the franchise can ignore the outside noise and do what's best not only for the team, but for the development of Shedeur Sanders. Now, with that being said, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.
I don't concern myself with outside type of things, but I'm committed to his development, just like all of our rookies. So we'll continue to focus on getting our guys better, and that's what we'll stay committed to, and that's what's important to me.
Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Culture, all things sports. It's Jay Banfo, and we got to talk about Shedeur Sanders. But before we get into that, like, comment, share, subscribe, and thanks for your support. So, the Cleveland Browns wrapped up preseason football by defeating the Los Angeles Rams 19-17 on Saturday. This was a very important game for the two rookie quarterbacks, Deion Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, as they continue to compete for the backup quarterback position. Deion Gabriel entered the game in the second quarter and looked really impressive. He went 12 for 19 with 129 passing yards and one touchdown pass. He also executed a near-perfect 2-minute drill in which he finished it off with a 3-yard touchdown pass. He had a good bounce-back game from his previous outing in which he threw a pick six and had a fumble loss. On the other hand, Shedeur Sanders struggled as soon as he entered the game. Sanders finished the game 3 for 6 for only 14 yards passing. He got sacked 5 times, only got 1 first down, and the total team offensive yards when he was in the game was -9 yards. Now, I'm not surprised Sanders had a game like this. We have to remember, he was a 5th-round quarterback who has been coached by one person his entire life, his father, Deion Sanders. The learning curve from college football to the pros is huge, and Sanders is going through the typical journey of a late-round pick. However, a lot of people don't see it that way, and they are actually accusing the Cleveland Browns of trying to sabotage Shedeur Sanders. The media has given every excuse as to why Sanders played like trash. They said that the offensive line played bad, was upset that a 4th-string quarterback had to play with other 3rd and 4th-string players, and because he was taken out of the game and replaced by Snoop Huntley, he couldn't redeem himself by executing a 2-minute drill. Now, let me dissect each one of those points. First of all, the offensive line did not play bad. Sanders held onto the ball way too long, which led them to being sacked 5 times. He did the same thing at Colorado, so it wasn't that surprising to see him do it versus the Rams. Secondly, why would a 4th-string quarterback be playing with the ones and twos when everybody is healthy? That has never been the case in the NFL. Also, if Sanders is playing with 3s and 4s on offense, the opposing team is also playing with 3s and 4s, so everything is on an even playing field. If Sanders was actually that good, he would be able to elevate his teammates no matter what skill level they have. And lastly, Sanders was removed from the game by Coach Stefanski and replaced by Snoop Huntley, a veteran quarterback. He actually led the Browns down the field, and they were able to win on a field goal. Now, people in the media wanted to see Sanders get that opportunity to operate a 2-minute drill, and I understand that point. But nobody is looking at it from the point of the coaches. Shedeur Sanders was given 5 drives in the game to produce something, and he did absolutely nothing. Based on those drives, why would the coaches trust him to lead them down the field? In the words of Coach Herm Edwards, you play to win the game, whether it's preseason or not. The coaches felt like Snoop Huntley could actually lead them to victory, which he did. When Shedeur Sanders dropped to the 5th round of the NFL draft, people's expectations of him as a quarterback should have changed. Being a late round pick means you get limited opportunity to showcase your talent. But when you do get those opportunities, you have to show up and show out. Now, Sanders had a bad game, but I think he will be fine. Now that the regular season is about to start, the media can focus on the players that will actually be playing in the game. Sanders can continue to grow as a player and a person on the sidelines, and we must understand that there is nothing wrong with that. Now, with that being said, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Culture, all things sports. It's Jay Banfo, and we got to talk about Shedeur Sanders. But before we get into that, like, comment, share, subscribe, and thanks for your support. So we got to talk about Shedeur Sanders because he's actually made news as a third-string quarterback. Now, the plan wasn't to talk about him until he actually got into the game, but he made news. So Cleveland radio host Tony Rizzo reported that Shedeur Sanders is not running the scout team in practice. Instead, veteran quarterback Bailey Zappi is running scout team. And this made headlines because a lot of people are frustrated that he isn't running the scout team. They don't like the development of Shedeur Sanders. They feel like the Cleveland Browns is holding him back. They feel like he's not getting the reps in practice, and they just are frustrated. They actually want him traded. They don't want the Browns to deal with him anymore. And I'm really confused because I think people forget that he is a fifth-round quarterback. Now, I get that he was supposed to be a first-round quarterback, but that didn't happen. So when he dropped to the fifth round, you would think people's mind would adjust to what happened. Hey, the NFL, they deem him as a fifth-round quarterback talent. Now, I'm not saying they're right or wrong, but where we're at right now, that's where he's at. I'm confused because I've never seen somebody get so much attention for what they do in practice. Like, the Sanders last name, I get it. He's Deion's son. He did really well in Colorado. But this whole phenomenon is kind of reminding me of the Tim Tebow phenomenon. Now, if you don't know about the Tim Tebow phenomenon, when he got drafted to the Denver Broncos, people immediately wanted him to play. Like, it was a big deal. You know, if you know about Skip Bayless, and every day on First Take, he was clamoring for Tim Tebow to play. It was so much pressure for them to put in Tebow before he was actually ready to play. So they threw him in. He won a playoff game. Cool. But that didn't last long. He didn't last in the NFL for too long. So it's actually reminding me of Tim Tebow, how they're treating Shedeur Sanders. They don't want him to go through proper development. They just want to see him play. They think he's going to be able to save a franchise. And right now, the Cleveland Browns coaching staff, they don't see that right now. And there's nothing wrong with that. If he needs more development, he needs more development. We aren't there at the practice facility seeing what's going on. Maybe he's just not ready. And that's not a bad thing. You can continue to develop without actually taking practice reps because you have a playbook that you have to study, right? You have reads and commands that you have to learn. So all of this is still going on. The only thing is he's not taking practice rep currently. Things may change in a 17-week season. Now, do I think Shedeur Sanders is going to play this season? Yes. The Cleveland Browns, I don't think they're a good football team. They're going to go to Dillon Gabriel at some point, and then at some point they're going to go to Shedeur. It's just that people are forcing the issue quicker than it needs to happen, and I just don't understand that. Let that man develop. Let the coaches do the best that they can to put him in the best position, and let's have some patience. It's nothing wrong with being patient. He's a third-string quarterback. Now, with that being said, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.
So he understood that whole conversation, and he wanted to talk to Shedeur as well as he wanted to talk to me. And I put Shedeur on the phone, and Shedeur, I don't want to say how it went, but how in the world can somebody fault him for saying or thinking, why in the world would I go back up Lamar for 10 more years?
For sure.
I've never sat on the bench and said, well, I learned a lot today.
That's my place to answer. You know, that's nothing I can't answer. Not answer, but I know for sure I'm not. I know if you see the quarterback play in the league right now, I know I'm capable of doing better than that.
Welcome everybody to the Sports Culture, all things sports. It's Jay Banfo, and we got to talk about Deion and Shedeur Sanders. But before we get into that, like, comment, share, subscribe, and thanks for your support. So, Deion and Shedeur Sanders continue to make headlines for the things they say rather than the things that occur on the football field. So let's start with Coach Prime, Deion Sanders. Deion made a guest appearance on the Kelsey Brothers podcast called New Heights. On this podcast, he touched on a variety of topics such as the 90s Cowboys, coaching, and being a true sports athlete. But what stood out to me was when he discussed his son, Shedeur Sanders. Now, he talked about how Shedeur made the decision to not be drafted by the Baltimore Ravens and Philadelphia Eagles because he sees himself as a starter and not a backup to Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts. Now, this video isn't necessarily about that, but let me touch on that topic for a second. I think it was a mistake for Shedeur to not want to play for the Ravens or Eagles. Those two franchises are known for being world-class organizations that know how to develop players at all positions. Long term, it would have been better for Shedeur to learn under Lamar or Jalen. As a fifth-round pick, you aren't drafted to be an immediate starter. So why not develop with a franchise that has a great track record of development? The Cleveland Browns organization has been the laughingstock of the league for decades. So for Shedeur to end up there, hoping to start sooner rather than later, is a miscalculation in my opinion. Now, back to Coach Prime, Deion Sanders. On the podcast, he stated, I've never sat on the bench and said, well, I learned a lot today. Coming from him, that makes complete sense. Deion Sanders was a generational athlete who played multiple sports professionally, and at no point in his life did he have to sit on the bench. But generational athletes tend to forget one thing. Everybody can't do the things they do. Athletes like Deion, Michael Jordan, Wilt Chamberlain, and Tiger Woods can't really teach the next athlete anything because they had God-given talent that just couldn't be touched. So, I've always thought Coach Prime projecting himself to the things he would do for Shedeur was a bad strategy. No matter how much confidence Shedeur Sanders has, he does not have his father's talent and ability. So we all have to recognize that his path is totally different. Now, Shedeur conducted an interview with ESPN Cleveland, and I will give him credit. He answered the question truthfully. I know if you see the quarterback play in the league right now, I know I'm capable of doing better than that, Sanders stated. All players should feel like they are capable to play in the NFL at a high level. That's how they actually got to the NFL. But Shedeur should have known by saying that will cause an uproar in the NFL community. Shedeur is a third-string quarterback who was selected in the 5th round of this year's draft. People in his position barely make the team, let alone play in a game. His time will come soon, and I just hope he can back up his words when he gets that opportunity. Now, with that being said, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.
Vocally, anything to say?
I guess one more. What do you think? You have to show, show to the coaches just to have that belief in you that you can, be ready.
Welcome everybody to the Sports Culture, all things sports. It's Jay Banfo, and we got to talk about the Cleveland Browns. But before we get into that, like, comment, share, subscribe, and thanks for your support. So the Cleveland Browns, they finally made the decision to change quarterbacks as Dylan Gabriel is going to take over for Joe Flacco. Now, everybody saw this coming because Joe Flacco is a 40-year-old quarterback who is known for turning the ball over. And that's what he's been doing. He already has 6 turnovers on the season. So they decided to go with their 3rd-round draft pick in Dillon Gabriel. Now, here's where the controversy kind of comes in, right? So the media obviously wanted to talk to Dillon Gabriel about how he feels about taking over, and he said all the right things. You know, he was humbled. He was thankful for the opportunity. Cool. They also talked to Joe Flacco about how he felt. He's a veteran. He's been through this plenty of times. He also said the right things. That's when we get to Shedeur Sanders. And when they asked him about how he felt about the whole quarterback situation, he literally said nothing. Like, he mouthed words, and I don't even think words came out of his mouth. Obviously, it's just a bad look on all fronts for Shedeur Sanders. Like, he's a 5th-round draft pick, and he's acting like he is the franchise quarterback, and that's just not the case at all. This is probably one of the main reasons why he fell to the 5th round, because of his attitude. During the whole draft process, number one, he didn't participate in the combine. Number 2, he did an interview with every team at the combine, and he just has this entitlement issue that is just not going to play right with the NFL. Like, this is just not going to work out. So I've made plenty of Shedeur Sanders, Deion Sanders videos since I started this channel. And one thing I've always said was Shedeur Sanders is going to get his opportunity with the Cleveland Browns. 3rd string, 2nd string, whatever. He was going to get a chance this season because the Cleveland Browns, they're a bad team. They're 1-3 right now. They're changing quarterbacks. He was going to get an opportunity. But after this interview, I don't see it happening. Honestly, I think the Cleveland Browns are either going to cut bait with him, trade him, get rid of him. They tried. They gave him an opportunity. It doesn't seem like he's taking that opportunity and doing the best that he can. And I just think it's best that both parties split. We'll see what happens. Good luck to Dillon Gabriel as he makes his NFL debut this weekend. I'll be looking forward to it. Shedeur Sanders, I think it's over with for him as a Cleveland Browns potential quarterback. That interview, being silent, he's immature. He has a lot of growing up to do. He's getting bad advice from Deion Sanders or anybody in his camp. Yeah, I don't see him playing a single down with the Cleveland Browns. Now, with that being said, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Culture, all things sports. It's Jay Banfo, and we got to talk about Shedeur Sanders. But before we get into that, like, comment, share, subscribe, and thanks for your support. So, the Cleveland Browns starting quarterback, Dillon Gabriel, has had 4 starts so far in his career, and let's just say he hasn't been that impressive. On the season, Gabriel has a 59% completion percentage, 702 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Those numbers don't scream franchise-type quarterback. Now, I understand you have to be patient with the rookie quarterback, especially one that was drafted in the 3rd round. However, the Cleveland Browns are in a unique position because they drafted another quarterback in the 5th round, Shedeur Sanders. Now, when the Browns decided to trade Joe Flacco to the Cincinnati Bengals, that was a clear sign that they were giving up on the season and preparing for the future. I'll give the GM some credit in this regards. They drafted some quality players, led by Quinshon Judkins, the running back out of Ohio State. However, at some point, the Browns are going to have to start Shedeur Sanders, and I believe that time is now. The Browns are 2-6 on the season and won't be making the playoffs. With Dillon Gabriel playing uninspiring football, why not start Shedeur after the bye week? Now, head coach Kevin Stefanski already addressed that, and he is sticking with Dillon Gabriel. Playing good on offense is about 11 guys on the field and us coaches doing our job. Obviously, young players will learn in each outing that they're out there. I think Dillon will continue to learn, will continue to get better, but it's really an entire offensive type of thing where we all need to be better, Coach Stefanski stated. Now, I understand what he's saying, but have you seen the Browns' offense with Dillon Gabriel running the show? As of today, the Browns are ranked 31st in offensive total yards, 30th in points per game, 31st in passing yards per game, and 29th in rushing yards per game. They have a great defense led by Myles Garrett, but as you can see, the offense is horrible. Now, do I think Shedeur Sanders is the answer for the Cleveland Browns? No. I honestly think he shouldn't play at all this season and continue to develop from the sidelines. But like I said, the Browns are basically out of the playoff picture, and they put themselves in this position when they traded Joe Flacco. At this point, Dillon Gabriel hasn't shown enough to stay on as the starting quarterback. Maybe one day he will turn into a solid starting quarterback, but right now, he's been below average. Give the keys to Shedeur Sanders now and see what he produces. The fans, the media, and the NFL is ready to see Shedeur. Now, if he produces as a starting quarterback, congrats. But if he showed that he's a bad quarterback or that he isn't ready, no harm, no foul, and you move on from the 5th round draft pick. Now, with that being said, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time. Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Culture, all things sports. It's Jay Banfo, and we got to talk about Shedeur Sanders. But before we get into that, like, comment, share, subscribe, and thanks for your support. So, it finally happened. Shedeur Sanders finally made his NFL debut on Sunday versus the Baltimore Ravens. Now, he wasn't brought in because of bad quarterback play, but because Dillon Gabriel was ruled out for the remainder of the game because of a concussion. So Shedeur came into the game when they were winning 16-10 in the third quarter. Now, in fairness, the game was an ugly, sloppy game from the beginning. Both starting quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson and Dillon Gabriel, didn't do much in the game. Lamar actually had 2 interceptions and was sacked 5 times. So this just wasn't a good, clean game offensively. So Shedeur came in the game, and this is what happened on the Browns' offensive possessions. Punt, interception, punt, 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 turnover on downs. Shedeur finished 4 of 16 for 47 yards, an interception, and was sacked twice. Remember, I said the Browns were winning 16-10, but they ended up losing to the Ravens 23-16. They didn't score a single point when Shedeur was in the game. Now, to be quite honest, I don't want to hear any excuses when it comes to Shedeur. He played like straight trash and looked ill-prepared for the moment. Now, in the coming days, you're going to see Shedeur and Deion Sanders fans come up with all types of excuses. They're going to say stuff like, well, he didn't get any first-team reps, and the coaching staff didn't believe in him. Also, did you see all the drop passes? I am begging y'all, please ignore those people. The job of the backup quarterback is to be ready at all times, and Shedeur clearly looked like he wasn't ready for the moment. Now, in my last video on Shedeur, I was ready for him to start, but after seeing that performance from him, I think it's best for him not to see the field the rest of the season. A lot of the traits, like holding on to the football too long and taking unnecessary sacks, still plague him today in the NFL. He's not ready to start. And actually, a lot of people owe Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski an apology. He tried to guide Shedeur along slowly, but Shedeur fans weren't having that at all. They wanted him to start from the beginning, but the coach clearly knew he wasn't ready. Next week, if Dillon Gabriel can't play because of his concussion, the Browns must start Bailey Zappi. I don't think at this point having first-team reps and a week to prepare is going to help Shedeur. He needs another offseason to try and get better, and throwing him into this fire this year will not help the situation. Once again, I don't want to hear any excuses. Shedeur Sanders played back, and we all have to be honest about it. Now, with that being said, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time. Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Culture, all things sports. It's Jay Banfo, and we got to talk about Shedeur Sanders. But before we get into that, like, comment, share, subscribe, and thanks for your support. So, Shedeur Sanders has been named starter for this week versus the Las Vegas Raiders after Dillon Gabriel missed the second half of last week's game versus the Ravens due to a concussion. In relief of Dillon Gabriel last week, Shedeur had a bad game by going 4 for 16 for 47 yards, no touchdowns, and an interception. Many Shedeur Sanders fans have been waiting for this moment ever since he was drafted in the 5th round of this year's NFL draft. Now, in my previous video on Shedeur, I felt like Bailey Zappi should have gotten the start ahead of Shedeur. In my opinion, he's not ready yet to be an NFL starter, but he's going to get his opportunity this weekend. Now, the good news for Shedeur is that he gets to play against the Las Vegas Raiders, arguably one of the worst teams in the NFL. Dak Prescott on Monday was able to throw 4 touchdowns on this horrible defense. So my expectations for Shedeur is that he should have a good game versus the Raiders. The excuse last week, as far as why he played so bad, was that he didn't get any first-team reps. That excuse is over with, as it's been reported that Shedeur would get every rep with the starter offense. The main thing I want to see from Shedeur is, can he remain calm in the pocket and not drift backwards when team blitz? Versus the Ravens, he took 2 bad sacks and always panicked at the blitz. The blueprint is out there, so hopefully Shedeur will be better prepared when team blitz, because that's going to happen a lot this Sunday. Now, I want to talk about the relationship between head coach Kevin Stefanski and GM Andrew Berry. So, per Albert Breer, a journalist for Sports Illustrated, explained that the Browns coaching staff wanted to redshirt Shedeur Sanders this season, meaning that he would not see the field at all and learn from the sidelines. Now, that makes complete sense from my perspective. Remember, Shedeur was the 4th-string quarterback to start the season. The coaches weren't even thinking about Shedeur playing meaningful football, which is why he never got first-team reps. It was a general manager, Andrew Berry, who traded Kenny Pickett and eventually Joe Flacco. Coach Stefanski said this after the Flacco trade. First, I'll tell you, is the Joe trade took us by surprise. That was not something that we saw coming. That lets you know there's a big disconnect between GM and coaching. The GM basically forced the coach to play Shedeur before he wanted to. It's a recipe for disaster when everybody is not on one accord. Now, I'm not saying Shedeur is being set up for failure. He's a 5th-round pick who has an opportunity to start in the NFL. Regardless of upper management and the organization, Shedeur has a job to do, and it all begins this weekend versus the Raiders. Now, with that being said, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time. Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Culture, all things sports. It's Jay Banfo, and we got to talk about Shedeur Sanders. But before we get into that, like, comment, share, subscribe, and thanks for your support. So Shedeur Sanders made his first NFL start today on the road against the Las Vegas Raiders. And I got to be honest on my assessment of Shedeur Sanders today. He played well. Shedeur finished 11 of 20 for 209 yards with 1 touchdown pass and 1 interception. Now, the interception he threw, it was really bad. He just didn't see the defender in coverage and threw it right to him. Obviously, as the quarterback, you can't have that. But besides that, Shedeur played well enough to lead the Browns to the victory, 24-10. In doing that, Shedeur became the first Cleveland Browns rookie to win their first career NFL start. So, salute to him for that. So, there were multiple things that Shedeur did that really impressed me in this game. Now, he only got sacked once for 3 yards, And honestly, that was my biggest concern with Shedeur. Too many times in his career, he held on to the ball way too long and took unnecessary sacks. Now, in this game, he played within the pocket and got the ball out on time. Also, more times than not, he kept it simple and took what the defense gave him. On his touchdown pass, he threw a quick swing pass to the running back, who then took it 66 yards for the touchdown. Now, we do have to put things into perspective before we decide to put Shedeur Sanders in the Hall of Fame. First of all, the Raiders are probably the worst football team in the NFL. The Raiders have lost 9 of their last 10 games, and Geno Smith in this game, he was sacked 10 times. It was actually the Browns defense that won this game for them, and the offense did enough for them to win. Now, with this performance, I do think Shedeur did enough to take the job away from Dillon Gabriel. Dillon just hasn't done much when he started, and the one thing that Shedeur can do that Dillon Gabriel can't, or he just hasn't shown the ability to, is stretch the field. In this game, Shedeur completed a 52-yard bomb to Isaiah Bond. That alone should have Shedeur starting for the rest of the season. Like I said earlier, if Shedeur can play from the pocket and avoid taking bad sacks, he can actually be a solid player in this league. Now, next week, the Browns play a much better defense at home versus the San Francisco 49ers. If Shedeur is named starter, I will expect a more closer game versus those 49ers. Now, with that being said, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time.
IB, huge play. Q, huge play. Harold making a big play. And then another rookie making his first start. Nice job, Shedeur. Well done. There's that old saying, save the best for last. How about that fucking defensive performance? Yeah. Holy is what I have to say about that. 10 sacks by our defense. 10 sacks. Okay? I got one ball in my hand. Okay, I got a guy, he's got to get a cold every week. Okay, he had a cold this week. Wasn't feeling himself. 3 sacks, which gives him 18 on the season through 11 games, which breaks his own Browns record. Myles Garrett.
Come on, man. Yeah, making his first start. A guy that you didn't really want to start. A guy that you didn't even want in your organization.
Right.
And that's all he get. Great job.
Well,
he don't get no game ball?
Nah, he don't get no game ball, Unc. That wasn't his pick. That's not what they want. They don't want him to succeed. You know that. That's no disrespect. The owner told you to himself. Even the head coach.
Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Culture, all things sports. It's Jay Banfo, and we got to talk about Shedeur Sanders. But before we get into that, like, comment, share, subscribe, and thanks for your support. So today, Shedeur was named the starting quarterback for the Browns, despite Dillon Gabriel being clear of a concussion. Now, Shedeur had a good game versus the Raiders, in which he went 11 for 20 for 209 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 pick. If you watched my previous video on Shedeur, I felt like he played well enough to continue to start, regardless if Dillon Gabriel is healthy or not. Now, what has surprised me is the discourse that the national media has taken when discussing Shedeur. Now, like I said, Shedeur had a good game, but if you listen to the national media, you would have thought Shedeur was the second coming of Tom Brady. I made it my attempt to see how they were going to cover Shedeur, and he's getting entirely too much credit for the win when the defense was the main reason why they won. The defense had 10 sacks, and Myles Garrett had 3 of them, who is arguably the best player in the NFL right now. So I don't want to discredit Shedeur or take anything away from him. He did his job, and I want to see him continue to grow. But what continues to make my head hurt is seeing Shedeur and Deion fans be biased when talking about him. I get it. We all love the Sanders family. However, we all need to be objective when discussing Deion and Shedeur. Now, not to get off track, but did y'all see what happened with Coach Prime did in his game versus Arizona State? He put in Ronald Coleman to run the ball in a critical time of the game. The only issue is, Ronald Coleman plays wide receiver and has never carried the ball in his entire football career. This happened in the fourth quarter, and guess what happened? He fumbled the ball. He basically cost them the game, but nobody naturally wants to discuss it because they don't want to be critical of Coach Prime. That's what's going on with Shedeur right now. Even if you are objective like myself, you will be called a hater just because you don't think Shedeur is that good. And lastly, I'm still seeing folks in the media say Coach Kevin Stefanski doesn't like and is trying to sabotage Shedeur. They are actually mad that Stefanski didn't give more credit to Shedeur after the win. In my eyes, they wanted Coach Stefanski to get down on both knees, and I'm just going to leave it at that. But if you know, you know. The game ball actually went to Myles Garrett, and he deserved it, not the rookie quarterback who managed the game. Now that Shedeur is the starter, the discourse is only going to get worse. I'm really interested to see what the excuse will be when Shedeur actually plays bad. Now, we've seen him play bad in that preseason game versus the Rams, and the excuses were off the chart. I just hope one day the media can put their pom-poms down and be objective. But I'm not that optimistic. Now, with that being said, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time. Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Culture, all things sports. It's Jay Banfo, and we got to talk about Shedeur Sanders and the Cleveland Browns. But before we get into that, like, comment, share, subscribe, and thanks for your support. So Shedeur Sanders made his second career start on Sunday versus the San Francisco 49ers. Shedeur and the Browns meant to keep the momentum going as they won last week versus the Raiders. Unfortunately, they ended up losing 26-8. Now, the good news is Shedeur played another okay game by going 16 for 25 for 149 yards, a touchdown pass, and no turnovers. Also, it was already announced that Shedeur will be starting again next week versus the Tennessee Titans. Now, for most of the game, the Browns were very much in it as the score was 10-8 at halftime. But there were a lot of self-inflicted wounds that cost the Browns the game. Now, I want to talk about the game plan for the Browns versus the 49ers. We all know the Browns have a great defense and a really good run game with Quinshon Judkins. So it wasn't a surprise to see them depend on that. They basically had Shedeur game managed and put him in position not to make mistakes. Now, do I believe this is the best way to develop Shedeur moving forward? Actually, yes, I do. Shedeur was a fifth-round pick who, in the coach's eyes, wasn't in their game plan to even start this season. So, in order for this thing to work, you have to depend mostly on the run game on offense and rely on the defense to just do their job. So, Shedeur was sacked 3 times, but that mostly came because they were forced to throw the ball, being down double digits. His pocket presence continued to improve as he's been stepping up in the pocket and not drifting back so much. At this point in the season, you just want to see continued improvement from Shedeur, and I think he's been doing that so far. Now, I do got to be honest. I'm not fully prepared to say Shedeur is a franchise-type quarterback. Like I've said, in his first 2 starts, he's been okay, but he hasn't done anything spectacular. And if you want to blame the coaches for being too conservative with him, fine, I'll give you that. But Shedeur, at this point in his career, has to keep improving if he wants the Browns to not go get another quarterback in next year's NFL draft. Now, with that being said, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time. Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Culture, all things sports. It's Jay Banfo, and we got to talk about Shedeur Sanders. But before we get into that, like, comment, share, subscribe, and thanks for your support. So today, the Cleveland Browns head coach, Kevin Stefanski, named Shedeur Sanders the starting quarterback for the remainder of the season. This comes after Shedeur had the best game of his young career, in which he threw for 364 yards and accounted for 4 touchdowns. First of all, I completely agree that Shedeur should start the rest of the season. He has shown that he is a capable quarterback so far this season, so it's only fair that he remains the starter. Now, with this performance, do I think the Cleveland Browns have found their quarterback of the future? Not at all. Now, I'm not going to take anything away from Shedeur and his performance versus the Tennessee Titans. He played an excellent game at the quarterback position in which the offense was clicking unlike anything they've done this season. Now, the only problem is, and I just got to be honest, Shedeur played the worst team in the NFL. Prior to this win, the Titans were riding a 7-game losing streak and were in contention to getting the number 1 overall pick in next year's NFL draft. If there were ever a game in which Shedeur should have played well, it was this one. And once again, credit to him for that. But in the grand scheme of things, Shedeur has to continue to play well if the Browns plan on making him their future starting quarterback. It's already been reported that Deshaun Watson will be back in 2026 for the Cleveland Browns, and in reality, that makes complete sense. The Browns owe Watson a lot of money. So they have to see if he's still a capable quarterback who can put up numbers and potentially win games. Now, I understand he's coming off an Achilles injury, and even prior to the injury, he was playing like straight trash. But who knows what may happen at this point? You just have to see what Deshaun Watson can do. Now, that may hinder the growth and development of Shedeur, but you really can't compare a 5th-round rookie quarterback to a former Pro Bowl quarterback who has a $230 million fully guaranteed contract. Now, it was one more thing that I want to touch on in the Browns versus Titans game. Now, Shedeur led the Browns back into the game, and they ended up being down by 2 with a chance to tie the game on a 2-point conversion. Now, as you saw, the Browns ended up running the play without Shedeur Sanders on the field, and it ended up being a disaster of a play. They lost the game, and the media is blaming Kevin Stefanski for taking Shedeur out of the game. Now, I actually completely understand people's frustration with the coach not having Shedeur in the game. His arms and legs brought them back from the dead, so it would have made sense for Shedeur to be in the game to potentially tie the game. The only thing that frustrates me is when people in the media say Coach Kevin Stefanski is sabotaging Shedeur Sanders. That rhetoric has been going on all season, and at this point, it just needs to stop. Coach Stefanski is a former 2-time NFL Coach of the Year. It just wouldn't make sense to try and ruin a young quarterback. He's done the best that he can under a not-so-ideal situation. Now, imagine this as an NFL coach. Going into the season, you had 2 veteran quarterbacks on your team. One named Joe Flacco and another named Kenny Pickett. Now, you also have 2 rookie quarterbacks who you had no plans on playing this season. But because the general manager traded both of your veteran quarterbacks, you end up playing rookie quarterbacks that wasn't in your plan. That's what happened with the Browns, and the media hasn't talked about it at all. Shedeur was not supposed to play this season. Now, I'm happy for him and will continue to watch him progress, but context matters in this situation. Now, with that being said, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time. Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Culture, all things sports. It's Jay Banfo, and we got to talk about Shedeur Sanders. But before we get into that, like, comment, share, subscribe, and thanks for your support. So before I give my full thoughts on Shedeur Sanders' performance versus the Chicago Bears, I want to play a couple of videos of media pundits, and I want you to just listen to how they talk about Shedeur Sanders.
They still don't think the person that is at the helm right now is the answer. They don't.
Yeah. I mean, and I really hate to feel this way, but a part of me is like, yeah, we're going to let him start the rest of the season. Oh, Bears, Bills, Steelers, Bengals. If I'm Shedeur, I'm like, nah, I'm good. I already showed y'all what I can do. Put Dylan in there.
Nah, you
Let's
know,
see
matter
what
of
he
fact,
can do.
nah, I want him to play against the Bears. I want him to play against the Bills. I want him to play against the Steelers because I want him to show that I'm a competent quarterback and I can compete at the highest level as a rookie if given the right amount of time to prepare.
Right.
That's what I want. I want him. I want him to have.
No. You, Ocho. But this is not a mistake. They picked these games and why couldn't you name his ass the starter 3 games ago? Why was it week to week? Because you know what? Every time he don't want to answer a question, he always say, "Well, I don't want to get into that."
Right.
I don't want to get into that because they asked him before, is Shedeur going to start? Well, I don't want to get into that. Let's look at the film and all that. Bro, you know.
Wait. No. That's not true. That's not true. Because
I think if he beats Caleb Williams, I think he's better than Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
I mean, we keep forgetting that this kid's only been starting for 2 weeks. He's only had 2 weeks as a full starter. I don't count the first game when he played. He ain't had no reps. He ain't know the game plan, right? For him. That game plan was for Dylan Gabriel. Now he's getting a game plan for himself, the plays he likes. Now his head coach ain't acting like he ain't Shedeur, right? Now he letting that swagger go. Listen, if he beats Caleb Williams, another thing we got to talk about, all these NFL GMs. Yeah, them. This is why we need more players in the building. You know why? Because we don't care about how he talks on interviews. We don't care about where jewelry wears. We don't care about how he celebrates. We don't care who his daddy is. We want a dude that can ball and help our franchise win. And if you beat the number 1 pick in the 2 years ago draft class, we need to look at every GM in the eye and say, yo, are you suitable for this position? Are you the guy for our franchise? Because all y'all passed him up 5 times. And now y'all want to, listen, I ain't going to get crazy. If he win this game and he look good, I'm going to act crazy, though. Because I've been telling you that Shedeur Sanders is like that. And they didn't like him.
It is impossible. With the state of this offensive line and with the state of this coaching staff and this offense and guys that get balls taken out of their hands in the end zone, Jerry Jeudy, it's impossible to judge, to make any kind of judgment on a quarterback. And I'm not sticking up for Shedeur. I'm just being totally honest. Yeah, he threw 3 picks.
Now, I could play more of those types of videos all day, but I think y'all understand where I'm going with this. The discourse around Shedeur Sanders ever since he was drafted by the Cleveland Browns, for the most part, has been biased. I've made a lot of Shedeur Sanders videos on this channel, and the one thing I take pride in is being fair and objective. In the last video I did, I clearly said he played his best game as an NFL quarterback and gave him nothing but praise. But unlike other media pundits and content creators, I've also called out his bad games versus the Los Angeles Rams in preseason, when he came in the game versus the Baltimore Ravens, and obviously his worst game yesterday versus the Chicago Bears. Now, for the viewers, I have to say this. I don't dislike Shedeur Sanders, and I'm not hating on him. All I'm doing is watching the games and giving a fair critique on what I see. I have no reason to hate on Shedeur. I think his ceiling in the NFL is career backup quarterback, and so far in his career, that's what he's looking like. Now, let me talk about the game versus the Chicago Bears. In that game, Shedeur went 18 for 35 for 177 yards passing, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and was sacked 5 times. There's no other way to say it. But Shedeur Sanders, he played like trash. He could have easily turned the ball over 2 more times, but Nashawn Wright dropped the interception, and also the refs bailed the Browns out on what should have been a sack fumble. Now, let me give Shedeur some love because he had 3 really good throws that showed flashes of good quarterback play. He threw 2 bombs to Isaiah Bond for huge yards, and then a ball that ended up being intercepted by Jalen Johnson because he made a hell of a play. But with that, 3 great throws out of 35 isn't going to cut it in the NFL. Also, he still holds on to the ball too long, and the Bears defense took full advantage by blitzing him 47% of the time. Listen, at the end of the day, do I think Shedeur is that bad? No, but I also think his performance versus the Tennessee Titans was an outlier. So for this season, Shedeur has 5 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. And look, I don't want to hear any excuses because nobody gave Dylan Gabriel any excuses, and he has 7 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. Listen, I'm disappointed in the bias and excuses for Shedeur, but just know on this channel, I'm always going to call a spade a spade. Now, with that being said, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time.
What would you say about your maturation and your growth since then to have this home victory against a division rival, the Pittsburgh Steelers?
I'll say overall, I'm able to see the field and the game slow down for sure. I think the main thing is like I just like throwing the ball. I just like throwing the ball a lot, and in some situations, you can't just throw your dog a bone. Sometimes you gotta be able to know like when it's calculated risk. But like I feel like our players are better than their player, so I just gave my guy a chance.
Welcome everybody to the Sports Culture, all things sports. It's Jay Banfo, and we got to talk about the Cleveland Browns and Shedeur Sanders. But before we get into that, like, comment, share, subscribe, and thanks for your support. So I felt like now would be a good time to do a full evaluation on Shedeur Sanders' rookie year with the Cleveland Browns. Now, I know he has one more game versus the Bengals, but whether he plays good or bad, it won't change my opinion on him. So let's first start by talking about his last game versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Browns ended up winning the game 13-6, and I'll say it was an impressive victory for Shedeur. It was a must-win game for the Steelers as they continue to fight for their playoff lives. So to get this upset victory, congrats to Shedeur. Now, he's getting a lot of credit for the victory, but if you actually watch the game, the defense is the main reason why they won. Now, they didn't create any turnovers, but the Browns defense was able to hold the Steelers to 6 total points. It's damn near impossible to win in the NFL when you only score 6 points. The Browns defense was amazing, and they deserve most of the credit. Now, in regards to Shedeur, he played an okay first half of football, while in the second half, he played like trash. Overall, he finished 17 for 23 for 186 yards passing, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Now, before I talk about the touchdown pass, let me say this. I don't dislike Shedeur Sanders, and I am not hating on him. All I'm doing is watching the games and giving a fair critique on what I see. Now that we got that out of the way, on that touchdown pass, it was a poorly thrown ball. The ball was underthrown, and Harold Fannin made a hell of an adjustment to make the catch. The throw was so bad that the defenders had no idea where the ball was. That just wasn't an NFL-level type throw, but nevertheless, it was a touchdown pass, and it counts for his stats. Now, on the 2 interceptions, those are rookie mistakes that a 5th-round quarterback can't continue to do. The one thing that coaches won't tolerate is a quarterback that throws interceptions. This season, Shedeur Sanders has 7 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. He has a total of 6 career starts, and in 3 of them, he has multiple interceptions. He is 2-4 in his starts, and the one game that he played great football from start to finish was against the Tennessee Titans, basically the worst team in football, in a game that they actually lost. I say all of that to say this. There is no way the Cleveland Browns go into next season with Shedeur Sanders as the starting quarterback. Based off those stats alone, he doesn't deserve to be the starter next season. The high amount of interceptions tells me that he has a long ways to go to be a starting quarterback. He still processes the game too slow. He has an average NFL arm at best, and he's still uncomfortable in the pocket. Now, the Browns will have a high draft pick next year, and with that, they have to draft either Fernando Mendoza or Dante Moore. We have to also remember, Deshaun Watson will be back next year, and because of that contract, he will get an opportunity to start again for the Browns. I don't think I've ever seen an NFL team say, hey, Let's build a team around our 5th round draft pick after his rookie season. That's just not a thing, especially a quarterback who has 7 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. Honestly, I still want to see what Dylan Gabriel can do. You spent the 3rd round pick on him, and this season he has the same amount of touchdowns as Shedeur with only 2 interceptions thrown. The Browns have a lot of work to do to rebuild that franchise, but going into next season with Shedeur Sanders as your number 1 quarterback option, it just would be a terrible mistake. Now, with that being said, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time.